question. Does God deal with us? You may not even know what I'm asking yet, but I'll get it figured out. Does God deal with us in the negative or in the positive? And you say, what does that mean? Let's read Joshua 1 through 9. And I thought there's a lot of people I could use as examples in the Bible. There's a lot of bad examples. There's a lot of people in the Bible, God has to work on them in the negative. Lot. Okay? There's one. Lot. He had to work on Lot in the negative. Jonah. Jonah's an example of someone God had to work on him in the negative. Here's a positive example for you in Joshua. And that's what I wanted to show you, is just sort of how to do it right. Joshua 1 and verse 1. Now after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spake unto Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' minister, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give to them, even to the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given unto you, as I said unto Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. There shall not any man be able to stand before thee all the days of thy life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with thee. I will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people thou shalt divide for an inheritance the land, which I swear unto their fathers to give them. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that thou mayest observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded thee. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that thou mayest prosper whithersoever thou goest. This book of the law shall not depart out of thy mouth, but thou shalt meditate therein day and night, that thou mayest observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then thou shalt make thy way prosperous, and then thou shalt have good success. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed. For the Lord thy God is with thee whithersoever thou goest. What we see here in Joshua is an example of, or what we have going on rather in the life of Joshua is really taking the reins, or taking the baton, you might say, from Moses. And so this actually started to happen in the book of Numbers. We'll look at Numbers 27 in just a second, but it began in Numbers 27, or that's when the Lord sort of worked on Moses to get someone who would take his place. And what's happening is the children of Israel they've been on that wilderness journey for 40 years, and that whole generation that wouldn't go into the promised land has now passed off the scene, and there's a new generation of Israelite, and they're sitting here at the beginning of going into the promised land. And so there's this enormous task of leading the nation of Israel into the promised land now. And they've already failed this once as a nation, right? They've already been up to the border before. And you remember they sent in the spies, and the spies came back and basically put fear in Israel about, there's giants over there, and we'll never conquer them. The people are like grasshoppers. But it was, if you'll remember, Joshua and Caleb were the two that said, no, you don't understand. It's a land that floweth with milk and honey. He's given us this land. Let's go in and let's take it and let's possess it. It was those two. But the crowd went with the bad spies, and so they, rather than going into going into the promised land, they were forced to wander around in the desert for 40 years. We're at the end of that now. And Moses, even because of, we'll read it in a little bit, but because of a sin that Moses committed, he's not even able to go into the promised land. And so Joshua is the man that would basically take Moses' place. Now, just think for a second about the enormity of that task. You're going to take Moses' place. No one wanted to take Moses' place. He was the leader of the nation of Israel, and he's dealt with the Israelites all these years, and everyone along the way has seen that they're not the easiest group of folks to work with if you read the scriptures. And so God chooses Joshua to do this. And he puts on Joshua a pretty large responsibility. Basically, you're going to be the leader. But not only that, you're going to do something that has never been done before. You're going to lead this group into the promised land. You're going to go in there, and if you know anything about the book of Joshua, roughly the first half of the book of Joshua deals with the conquest of the land. He's going to take them from Jericho to Ai to all these different places, and they're supposed to push out the inhabitants of the land and settle there. And then the last half of the chapter, he's dividing the land up amongst the Israelites. And so it's a really big responsibility. And this honor of serving God and the leadership falls on Joshua. And so the question I maybe want to ask you tonight is, why Joshua? Why Joshua? Now, I'm going to answer that question in just a second, but I want you to think for a second. So all the things I just told you about Joshua, just sort of hold it in your brain somewhere, and let's talk about revival for a second. When we think about revival, what do we normally think about? And this is some of the things I've been thinking about the last couple of weeks. What do we normally think of when we think about revival? Well, the word means life again. So revival means, okay, I've come to a place in my spiritual walk where, I'm not dead because Christ has given me life and it's eternal life, but maybe I'm dry, right? Maybe I'm away from the Lord. When we normally think about revival, we think of God sort of, okay, during this revival, he's going to bring all the prodigals back to him. Does that make sense? Why do we have a revival? Well, because everyone's sort of prodigal. They're all away from the Lord, and so we got to get a guy in here and preach, and we got to bring them all back to the Lord. When we think about it that way, what I'm terming that tonight, that's how God has to work sometimes with us in the negative, right? He's got to bring us back. And so rather than, we'll talk about the positive in a second, it's almost as if, though, we think of revival, our default setting, if you think like me, the default setting for revival is, okay, I got to get right with the Lord again. That means, okay, I wasn't right with the Lord. Now, there's going to be people, maybe some of us, come into the revival this week, and we need to be brought back to the Lord. And if that's the case, I'm not discouraging that. If God works on someone to, there's a Jonah who is out, and he's sort of going the opposite way that he's supposed to go, by all means, I want the Lord to grab that person and bring him back into the fold. I want the Lord to restore those who are wayward. But what would happen if we showed up at revival right with the Lord? Where God could then work with us in the positive rather than in the negative. The encouragement tonight is this. We've got 4 days here. Well, let's see. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So however you want to work that. We got a few days here. Don't wait till Sunday to get right with the Lord. Because I feel like there's a different thing God could do in your heart if you showed up ready. All right, this is illustrated a few different ways, but before I was a pastor, long ago, I was a youth pastor for several years. And I brought a bunch of different groups of kids to church camps over the years. And what I noticed was there were always sort of two groups of kids that God dealt with. And so there was always that one group of kids that really, maybe they were saved. Well, let me say there's three groups of kids, right? There's the unsaved kids that we would bring, and God would obviously work on them towards salvation that week. And thankfully, we did see a lot of kids get saved. But then there'd be like of our Christian kids, our church-going kids, you might say, there's always two groups. There's those kids that honestly aren't living for the Lord. They're not living right. And they don't really have a care in the world about God or anything that He does. And God has to work with them all week, and let me just say it like this, in the negative. And He's going to convict them about their sin and about their media and their friends and their relationships. And it usually takes till like Wednesday of a youth camp for the Lord to really break through, because we've kept them away from phones and friends, all those things for about 3 days, and we've just done nothing but preach. And it usually takes till about midweek. Those young people, hopefully, prayerfully, by the end of the week, they get their hearts right with God, and sort of they're brought back from the negative. You might just say brought back up to zero, right? Is this making sense? There was always, though, a few kids, and it was always less kids. But there was always a few kids that really already were living for the Lord. And I'm not talking perfection here. I'm just saying they were reading their Bibles and they were praying and they were excited about what was going on at church. And sometimes it was the like ministry kids and preachers' kids and that kind of thing, but sometimes it wasn't. It was just young people that already loved the Lord and were living separated lives and doing that kind of thing. And it was, I'm just telling you, most of the time, there's exceptions to this, but most of the time, those were the kids that God called into the ministry. He called them to be preachers and missionaries, to go to full-time service. And I know there's exceptions. The Apostle Paul is an exception. The Apostle Paul was going the wrong way, and the Lord called him into a ministry. But in the experience I have had in most of the examples of the Bible, it's more common to see God call people to service that are already living for Him. Does that make sense? And so that's what I'm saying. When I brought those groups of kids to camp, you could almost, and as a youth pastor, you know who's who, and you could almost put a dividing line and say, God's going to work with you kids in the negative. He's going to convict you of sin and relationships and all those things. And God's going to work on that one about the ministry. I can almost guarantee it. And we could sense it going in, and before long, by the end of the week, you're seeing some of these decisions made. I'm saying all this because I also have experienced this in my personal life. When God has placed a call or a burden, whether it be when I was called to be a pastor, it was during a time when I wasn't being a knucklehead, right, as we might say. I was paying attention to the Lord, and I was in my Bible, and I was faithful to church, and I was serving, and I wasn't perfect, but I was trying to live a separated life for the Lord. That's when God called me to preach. There were a whole lot of years where I wasn't necessarily living that way, and I did not have a lot of those things settled in my life. And so God had to spend a lot of time convicting me of all my sin and problem. And I just kind of noticed that He can either work with us in the negative or in the positive. So my encouragement is this, and I read Joshua because Joshua, of all the people of Israel, God looked and He said, Joshua is the man to do this. Look back in Numbers 27. Joshua received this calling when he was already right with God. Numbers 27, and we'll read a few verses here. I also see the character of Moses in these verses. That's really, really neat. Moses wanted to go into the promised land. You know he wanted to. He had been, he had to go 40 years. He saw all his contemporaries die. It just had to be a heart-wrenching. I did a little math one time to figure out how many burials there were a day. That was Moses's. It was just his life for 40 years. He wanted to go into the wilderness, but back when God told him to speak to the rock, that it would bring water out of the rock, if you remember, he smote the rock twice. And so his actions there, God said, because you did that, you're not going into the promised land. God did give him a peek of it, but he wasn't able to go in. But Moses' concern was not, woe is me, I can't go in. His concern is who's going to lead these people. Look at this in Numbers 27 and look at verse number 12. The Lord said unto Moses, get thee up into this mount, Abiram, and see the land which I have given unto the children of Israel. And when thou hast seen it, thou also shalt be gathered unto thy people, as Aaron thy brother was gathered. So he's saying, you're going to go up, you're going to view the land, and then you're going to die. Verse 14. For ye rebelled against my commandment in the desert of Zin, in the strife of the congregation, to sanctify me at the water before their eyes, that is the water of Meribah and Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. So he's saying that, but for this sin, this is why you're not going in. Verse 15. And Moses spake unto the Lord, saying, let the Lord, the God of the spirits of all flesh, set a man over the congregation, which may go out before them, and which may go in before them, and which may lead them out, and which may bring them in, that the congregation of the Lord be not as sheep which have no shepherd. So isn't that pretty admirable of Moses? I mean, that's his concern is, okay, God, I understand, and I'm going to die, but we can't leave the Israelites without someone to lead them. And so his concern was, set a man over them. Look at verse 18. And the Lord said unto Moses, take thee Joshua the son of Nun. Notice this, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay thine hand upon him, and set him before Eleazar the priest, before all the congregation, and give him charge in their sight. You could go ahead and read the next part of that chapter, and Moses does exactly that. My point is this. Why Joshua? Because Joshua was already living for the Lord. Joshua was already was living in the Spirit, you might say. And so God was able to take him, not just, again, I'm kind of math-minded, so not just take him from negative whatever. Let's say if we are living in sin, our number is negative, right? He's not just taking him from negative and trying to get him back up to zero. He's taking him from wherever he is on the scale, and he's going to put him into the positive. He's going to work with him in the positive. How many times, how true is it sometimes that we view revival, Man Up Conference, other meetings in the year, maybe missions conference or something like that, ladies' retreats. How many times do we view it as, okay, I've been out in the world, I got to come back. I've been out in the world, I got to come back. I've been out in the world, okay, it's been a few months, we're having another meeting, I got to come back. What would happen, what would happen if we got ourselves right with the Lord before we hit one of those meetings, and then the Lord was able to go forward with us? You know what would happen? He'd lay a burden on our heart, not just to get ourselves right, but to do something for Him. He would lay a burden on our heart to be over some maybe ministry, or to witness to that person that we've been so concerned about, or to give in some area, or to serve in some area. When you start to see people step forward and serve the Lord, it's because God is all of a sudden able to deal with you in the positive. Is this making any sense? Look at 2 Timothy 2 with me. I thought about this verse. The question here is, what would God do with us if we showed up right with Him on day one? Now, listen, no one's going to be perfect Sunday morning. And let me say this too, there's nothing magical about a revival meeting. It's just another opportunity to get under the Word of God and get preached to. But what could God do if we showed up ready? We showed up, sins confessed, we've read our Bible all week, we've been praying, we've been abstaining from things we should abstain from. What would happen? What could God do if that was how we showed up? I promise you, it's not, see, God's going to work. He's going to work with you wherever you are. And if you show up in the negative on Sunday, I'm going to pray for you that He brings you back up to zero and maybe beyond. I'm just saying, what could He do if you were already in the positive? Okay, I haven't read my Bible all week. I show up to revival. Man, now I'm convinced I got to read my Bible this week. That's a good thing. If you're not reading your Bible and Sunday comes and we have revival, I hope you make a decision. I'm going to start reading my Bible. But what could God do if you were already reading your Bible and convinced of that? Do you see what I'm saying? He'd take you to the next step. Look at 2 Timothy 2, because these verses, I think, kind of hit the nail on the head. 2 Timothy 2 and verse number 20. But in a great house there are not only vessels of gold and of silver, but also of wood and of earth, and some to honor and some to dishonor. If a man therefore purge himself from these, he shall be a vessel unto honor, sanctified and meet for the master's use, and prepared unto every good work. Now, let me give you a little bit of context here in the chapter. Paul is saying, he's dealing with Timothy on sort of fighting bad doctrine for a little bit. There's some guys mentioned in verse number 17, and he's told them in verse 15 to rightly divide the truth. So he's basically saying this, stick to the good stuff, but then also verse 22, flee the youthful lust, follow righteousness. So essentially what's being said here is the way that you manage your life will determine whether you're a vessel of honor or a vessel of dishonor. Whether you're a vessel that's able to, notice this, an honor, sanctified, and meet for the master's use. And here's the word, prepared unto every good work. He says in a house, there's just sort of all these different vessels. There's gold ones, silver ones, wood ones, stone ones, and there's some that are to honor, some to dishonor. You're going to use some. Doesn't everyone in here have a favorite cup? You know, you got a favorite cup. Yeah, or favorite bowl. All right. In our house, we every now and then as a family, we I don't know why we're nerds, but we started doing these Bob Ross painting nights. Y'all know who that is? Bob Ross? Okay. So we got all sorts of happy little paintings in our house right now. And so every now and then we'll do one of these painting nights. And the other night we did one, and we're all sitting there with our easels and our thing, and we're painting our little picture. And we're using I noticed, our cereal bowls to wash our brushes. And I got to thinking, I hope we don't eat out of these anymore. And then after it's all over, you know, you could imagine painting with 5 people, 3 of them being kids. It's a mess. And so my wife and I are in the kitchen, and we're cleaning all the brushes, we're cleaning all the bowls. And I mean, that stuff's not coming out, all those bowls. And I looked at my wife and I said, well, these bowls are defiled. And she goes, yeah, they're done. These are now our painting bowls. You know, I'm not going to go tonight, and I might go tonight and get a bowl of cereal. I got some s'mores cereal over there and whole milk. And so I may go get me a bowl of cereal tonight, but I'm not going to use one of our Bob Ross painting bowls. Those are now vessels of dishonor. They're not meat to be used. I don't know what eating paint would do, but I don't want to find out either. So my point is, and I believe the verse is saying, we want to be a vessel that God can count on using. You're not going to be all dirtied up when He wants to use you. I believe this. I believe there are times in my life when God wanted to use me, and I wasn't meet for His use. I wasn't prepared unto every. I mean, if it tells us to be prepared, did you know the opposite is true? We can be unprepared. I promise you, there's been times in my life where God could have wanted to use me, but I was defiled in some way. I was not ready. When we show up Sunday, we ought to all show up vessels ready to be used. Vessels clean and ready to be put in the Master's hand so He can speak to us however He wants, so He can use us however He wants, so He can work with us in the positive. So, how do we get there? Well, back to the story of Joshua. Go back to Joshua, and we're going to finish this up. Joshua chapter 3. So Joshua begins to lead the children of Israel. He takes them right down to the banks of the Jordan. And in chapter number 3, he's going to take them over Jordan. But before he takes them over, he gives them some instruction. And this is the instruction tonight, okay? I'm not saying we're about to cross over Jordan on Sunday, okay? I'm just saying we're standing at the edge of an opportunity for God to use us. And men, we have an even bigger opportunity because we got revival, and then right after that, we got Man Up Conference. There's like a lot of opportunity we have to be spoken to. Joshua said in verse 5 unto the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. He goes, we're just for sake of time, we're only going to read that. You know what he says? Hey, get ready for God to work. Sanctify yourselves. Don't wait till you're over the Jordan. Don't wait till Sunday at 10 o'clock when the first message starts, and certainly don't wait till Wednesday night at 7 when the last message is starting. Sanctify yourselves now because God wants to do a work. That's my challenge tonight. Sanctify yourselves. Get ready. Be prepared. How do you do that? Well, I've got four little points here, and they're very simple. But when it says to sanctify ourselves, let me just give you 4 things that you can do between right now and Sunday morning that will help you to be in the positive when you come into church. First of all, deal with your sin today. I mean, isn't it true that, when we're under preaching, God reveals sin. But a lot of the things that we are into, we know it, and we can go ahead and deal with it now. Deal with your sin today. For not only confess it, but forsake it. If you'll go and read any passage, right? 2 Chronicles 7:14, Isaiah 57, maybe 15, several of the Psalms. You go read anywhere it talks about revival, you know what's right next to revival? It's confession of sin. It's there every time. So confess sin, forsake sin, deal with your sin. When it says sanctify yourselves, there's other passages where it's like the leader will say, like, put your idols away. And I'm going, why do they have idols? Well, because they're people. And as they're living, they're gathering those things up. Hey, put those things away. We're going to serve the Lord. I'm not saying anyone's going to be perfectly sinless on Sunday morning, because no one will be. But we can do a pretty good job the next few days of, hey, Lord, if there's any sin in my life that's unconfessed, something that I should change, help me to remember that, confess that, forsake that today. Don't wait till Sunday. Come in here with a clean slate, if at all possible. I would even encourage I would encourage you to watch your intake over the next few days. You say, what, am I supposed to watch what I eat? Well, it'd probably be good, but I don't really monitor that. No, your media. Yeah, watch what you're into the next few days. One time when I was in the youth department, this was when I was in the knucklehead phase. My music was all messed up. I had a lot of bad music that I listened to. And my youth pastor came to me and he said, why do you listen to all that junk? And then we had the argument. And he said, I tell you what, why don't you just get rid of that for a week? Now, wouldn't it be a good encouragement for him to say, why don't you just get rid of that forever? Well, sure. But he knew what he was doing. And he said, just get rid of it for a week and then come talk to me and see if it doesn't help your attitude. That's what he said to me. I'll never forget it. You know what I did? I got rid of it for a week. And you know what happened? It did help my attitude. And the next thing you know, I'm throwing 300 CDs in the dumpster, and we used to have CDs. Y'all remember? Big books. You drive and dig through your book of CDs. No, it might not be a bad idea to fast from some of those things this week. Those podcasts, those, the wrong music, the wrong movies, the wrong television shows, whatever, media. If the things on your Facebook feed are not honoring God, it might be a good thing, just put that thing up. I mean, I'd tell you it'd be a good thing to put it up forever, but between now and Sunday, if you did it and you showed up, I believe God would do something with that. So consider, between now, I don't have to wait till Sunday for God to get all over me about the things I already know I should be not doing. Go ahead and just give them up now and just try your best to live really good, really for the Lord the next few days, and just see what God will do in the meeting. So confession, forsaking of sin. Here's another one. Be committed to the Word the next few days. Again, shouldn't we be committed to the Word all the time? Well, yeah. But I'm just trying to make these little small goals. You got Thursday. If you haven't read your Bible today, hey, go home tonight, read it. But then you got Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning. Just say, I'm going to commit to read my Bible all 4 of those mornings. I'm going to spend some time with the Lord each morning. Commitment to the Word. Commitment to pray. Commitment to pray. These are things that you'll find right next to all those examples of revival. So, getting rid of our sin, commitment to the Word, commitment to pray. I'm going to pray every day between now and revival. And I'm not just going to pray about what I want from the Lord. I'm going to ask the Lord to speak to me in the revival. I'm going to ask Him every day. I'm going to bug Him about it. I'm going to be the importunate friend that just won't give up. And I'm going to keep asking Him, Lord, would you please speak to my heart this revival? You know why some of us don't do that? Because we're scared He might. You ever been there? I've been there. I've gone to youth camp as a youth kid, and I was scared to death of what God was going to tell me, because I knew He was going to. It's okay. Does God know better for us than we know for us? Okay, so just ask Him, Lord, would you speak to my heart? Lastly, commit to attend. Commit to attend. Just say, I'm going to be at every one of these meetings that it's humanly possible for me to be at. I know things happen. I know all that. I'm just saying, if you're able to be at these things, and don't let yourself off the hook easy, right? If you're able to be at these things, be at every service. So a commitment to attend. I just want to encourage you, church. Show up ready for revival. Let God deal with you we don't always have to be Jonah in the story. What if we were Joshua? And the Lord said, here's a person who's, oh no, they're not perfect. I mean, they're saved by the grace of God, but they're already living for me. They're already making me a priority. Now I will speak to this person. Be a great thing. All right, so that's it. Be ready for revival. Brother Mark's going to come and lead us in a prayer time. And tonight, we're going to take prayer requests, and I'm okay with that. I would like to focus, though. I want us to pray for our revival coming up. And so I don't hesitate to give us a request or a need, and we'll pray for that also. Brother Mark will help lead us here. But I want to pray for our revival, that we are ready. Pray for Brother Waterloo. I spoke to him this week. He's fired up. He's ready to. He's never been to Wyoming before, so he's real excited about that. And he's studying. He's getting ready, and it's going to be a great time. So pray for Brother Waterloo that God will give him the messages, work through him. Pray for the meeting. Pray for your own heart. All right, brother, I'll turn it over.